So what is the kingdom of God? In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus told his disciples to seek first the kingdom and his, God's righteousness. And over the years, I've asked many people what their understanding of the kingdom is. Now, you know, if you asked anybody what is a kingdom, they probably would say, well, it's a land ruled by a king. A bit like where I live in the United Kingdom. We have a monarch. But there are other countries still, not many, they also have a king, and so they're kingdoms too. When Jesus prayed for God's kingdom to come and for God's will to be done on earth, what was he actually asking for? Now, millions, if not billions, of people have said that prayer, asking for God's kingdom to come, and boy, do we need that kingdom. Especially with what's happening on the earth today. As you know, we're destroying the planet, the world is in disarray, we are threatened by all manner of things. Nuclear war, mass extinction, etc. Now, I've asked many people this question over the years, and you'd be amazed at the variety of answers I've had. I asked a lady whose husband was a clergyman what her understanding of the kingdom was. After a long pause, she looked at me and said, I don't know. I asked a church warden what his understanding of the kingdom was, and he said, it's everywhere. Well, you can't get more vague than that. But the usual answer I've had over the years is, the kingdom of God is in your heart. Now, where did they get that idea from? Well, when Jesus was on earth, he said, the kingdom of God is in your midst. Now, who was he talking to when he said those words? Was he talking to his disciples? No. Believe it or not, he was talking to the religious Pharisees who were seeking his execution. Could the kingdom of God possibly have been in their heart? They were out to kill the king. So, on trial, just short time later, he's on trial for his life before Pontius Pilate, the governor. Remember, he was held as king. They were waving palm branches, hailing Jesus as the king. Days later, and literally just a few days later, Jesus is on trial for his life. He's before Pontius Pilate. And of course, Pontius Pilate says, well, are you a king? Because everyone was saying he was a king. What did Jesus say in John 18:36? My kingdom is no part of this world. If my kingdom were part of this world, my attendants would have fought that I should not be handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not from this source. What did he mean by that? Well, clearly, he was not going to rule from Jerusalem, the White House, 10 Downing Street. He was really saying, when he said it's not from this source, he was clearly stating that his kingdom was going to be a heavenly kingdom. Now, it was foretold long in advance that this one would come. He was known as the Messiah. The prophecy, many prophecies in the Bible regarding the coming Messiah. But I'd like to read you what it says in Isaiah chapter 9 and verse 6. And you may be a little bit familiar with these words, actually. Because there in Isaiah 9 it says, a child has been born to us, a son has been given to us, and the rulership, the King James Bible actually says the government, will rest on his shoulder. His name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. Now there's two of those titles I'd just like to highlight. We really do need a wonderful counselor, don't we? The world is in disarray, governments can't agree, even governments within a nation are in disarray. They don't know the way out. And people everywhere are disillusioned. They want change, they want something better. Well, Jesus is the wonderful counselor, and when he was on earth, he was certainly the greatest teacher that there ever was. And he could solve any problem. In fact, when he said to the Pharisees, "The kingdom of God is in your midst," he gave ample proof that he was the king. What did he do? He could control the weather, he stopped the storm, he could resurrect the dead, he could heal any kind of sickness or ailment, and he could feed a multitude from next to nothing. So he was given everybody in those days an example of what life would be like under his reign. What a wonderful prospect that was. Now, was Jesus going to rule alone? He was the king of the kingdom. Was he going to rule alone as a king? Well, according to Revelation 14, he was going to have 144,000 helpers who would rule with him as kings and priests, bought from the earth, who know not what it's like to be humans. They can empathize with all the humans on the earth that they rule over. It's now a lovely arrangement. But I'd like to show you what it says in Revelation 5, which is quite fascinating. It's Revelation 5, and this is what it says. You made them to be a kingdom and priests to our God, and they are to rule as kings over the earth. You notice that? Kings, plural. So Jesus was obviously the king of the kingdom. They were going to rule as joint heirs with Jesus over where? Over the earth, ruling from heaven. So what was one of the necessary things for Jesus to do to cleanse the earth, to restore it to the original paradise, to make sure that God's original will was going to be done on earth as it is in heaven? Well, the action was quite drastic, as I'll show you in Daniel. Daniel 2, verse 44. In the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed. This kingdom will not be passed on to any other people. It will crush, think of that, God's kingdom will crush and put an end to all these kingdoms, and it alone will stand forever. So that's the only way. It's drastic, I know. It's the only way that peace and order, tranquility, a paradise could ever be restored, is that by getting rid of all these kingdoms that are at war with each other all the time. They have to be got rid of. And God's kingdom, you notice, will stand forever. And finally, I'd like to read to you the Apostle Paul's words in 1 Corinthians 15. After Jesus has restored everything to its original condition, made the earth a paradise, with all the animals in peace, at peace, with humans at peace, living on a cleansed earth, it says here in 1 Corinthians 15, 24, next, the end, when he hands over the kingdom to his God and Father, when he has brought to nothing all government and all authority and power. For he must rule as king until God has put all enemies under his feet, and the last enemy, death, is to be brought to nothing. So, can you see why it's so important that we know what God's kingdom is? Right now we want to be subjects of that kingdom. We want to obey the laws of that kingdom. We want to be footstep followers of Jesus, loving what is good, hating what is bad, hating war. Do you remember those words I said in the very first presentation, taken from Isaiah 2? They will have to beat their swords into plowshares, their spears into pruning shears. Nation will not lift up sword against nation, neither will they learn war anymore. Jehovah's Witnesses around the earth in 240 countries will die for their faith. They will never kill for it. They've turned their swords into plowshares. Just like Jesus, Jesus said, he that fights with the sword shall perish with the sword. So God's kingdom is a real government with Jesus as King. Don't you find that rather wonderful, to think that there is hope for us after all? So we don't have to worry about nuclear war. We don't have to worry about climate change. We don't have to worry about anything, because God's kingdom is about to act against this world. And that is why you need to act now. You need to find out the truth about God's kingdom. You can do that quite simply by going to jw.org. Any questions you have about the kingdom? In fact, you may not know this, but Jehovah's Witnesses back in the 1800s were foretelling that 1914 was a marked year in human existence. God's kingdom was going to be established in 1914. And they got the date from a prophecy in Daniel. You can check it out on jw.org. And the Watchtower magazine, which has been in circulation for well over 100 years, is the widest read magazine in the world, has been announcing Jehovah's kingdom for all those years. It's the most important subject. And if you think back to the four Gospels, the ministry of Jesus, that was what he was talking about all the time. So we should all know about the kingdom. Why are the answers so vague when I ask people what is their understanding of God's kingdom? Well, now you know, and you need to act now. This world is ending very soon. Please take heed, and thank you for listening.